holding on to faith through grief and loss. Grief is one of life's deepest valleys, a shadow that can seem to cover every moment with darkness. When we lose a loved one, the world feels fractured and disorienting, as though a part of us is missing. As we grapple with loss, we may find ourselves asking questions that echo through the ages. Why is this happening? Where is God in this? While there are no easy answers to these questions, our faith reminds us that we are not alone. Even in our grief, God is close, offering comfort, compassion, and the promise of healing. Psalm 34 verse 18 tells us, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." In our times of sorrow, this verse serves as a reminder that God doesn't stand distant. He draws near to us. Let's explore how faith can sustain us through grief, learn from biblical figures who endured loss, and discover practical steps to nurture faith during times of sadness. Embracing God's presence in the pain. One of the most comforting aspects of faith is the belief that God is present in our pain. When we are grieving, it's natural to feel as though God is far away. Yet Scripture assures us that He is intimately close to the brokenhearted. In the Bible, God repeatedly shows Himself to be a compassionate Father who understands our suffering. Consider the story of Lazarus in John 11. When Jesus learns that his friend Lazarus has died, He doesn't rush to fix the situation. Instead, He weeps alongside Lazarus's grieving family. Jesus knew He would raise Lazarus from the dead, yet He still chose to enter into their pain. This moment reveals God's heart for us. He mourns with us, He feels our hurt, and He offers us His presence as a comfort. When we allow ourselves to be open with God about our grief, we invite Him into our pain. This may look like praying through tears, journaling our feelings to Him, or simply sitting in silence, knowing He is near. Just as a loving parent sits beside their child, God sits with us, comforting us in ways that are deeper than words. The story of Job, a testament of faith and loss. In the Bible, few figures endured more profound loss than Job. Job was a faithful man, blessed with family, wealth, and health. But in a series of unimaginable events, he lost everything: his children, his wealth, his health. Job's grief was overwhelming, and he wrestled with deep questions of purpose and faith. Job's story is often read as a tale of perseverance, but it's also a deeply human story of mourning. Job didn't suppress his grief. He cried out to God, expressing his sorrow and confusion. His friends tried to offer answers, suggesting he must have done something to deserve his suffering. But Job knew better. He knew his pain wasn't a punishment. He continued to speak honestly with God, clinging to his faith even when it felt like God was silent. Job's story teaches us that it's okay to bring our full, authentic selves to God in grief. We don't need to hide our pain or pretend we have all the answers. Job's faith wasn't flawless. It was raw and real. And in the end, God honored Job's honesty and restored him. Like Job, we are invited to be honest with God, knowing that our faith isn't measured by having all the answers, but by our willingness to trust God even when we don't understand. Finding comfort in God's promises. During times of loss, it's easy to feel as though our lives have lost direction or meaning. This is where God's promises become a source of strength. Throughout Scripture, God offers promises to those who mourn. One of the most powerful promises is found in Revelation 21 verse 4, where we read, "He will wipe every tear from their eyes." There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. This verse reminds us that our grief is temporary, that God is creating a future where sorrow no longer exists. This future doesn't erase our current pain, but it gives us hope that one day our hearts will be fully healed. Holding on to this promise can be like holding onto a lifeline, reminding us that God's plan is bigger than our immediate circumstances. Practical steps to nurture faith through grief. Grieving with faith doesn't mean ignoring our pain. It means finding ways to anchor ourselves in God's love and promises. Here are some practical steps for nurturing faith through loss. Lean into prayer. Prayer can be a powerful source of comfort. It may feel hard to pray when you're grieving, but prayer doesn't always have to be filled with words. Sometimes, simply sitting in God's presence or whispering a few honest words is enough. Romans 8 verse 26 says, "The Spirit Himself intercedes for us through wordless groans." Even when we don't know what to say, God understands our heart. Seek support from a faith community. Grief can feel isolating, but we don't have to go through it alone. Surrounding ourselves with supportive, faith-filled friends or church members can provide a sense of belonging and hope. Galatians 6 verse 2 encourages us to carry each other's burdens. Letting others walk with us in our grief can be a powerful way to experience God's love through community. Embrace biblical stories of suffering and redemption. Reading stories of biblical figures who endured hardship can remind us that we're not alone in our struggles. Figures like Ruth, who lost her husband, or King David, who mourned deeply for his son, show us that grief is part of the human experience, yet God remained faithful to them. Their stories remind us that God is present in our darkest moments and can bring beauty from ashes. Cultivate gratitude amidst sorrow. Gratitude may feel impossible in the midst of grief, but it can be a small light in the darkness. Even as we mourn, acknowledging small blessings can help us remember that God's goodness is still present. This doesn't mean denying our sadness, but finding small ways to thank God for His love, presence, and the people who support us. Hold on to hope for the future. Grief can make the future feel bleak, but faith invites us to hope. Jeremiah 29 verse 11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to give you hope and a future." Even when our future feels uncertain, God's promises give us something to hold on to. As we move through grief, we can trust that God has a plan for us, a plan that includes healing and joy, a journey of healing and faith. Grief is a journey that looks different for everyone. Some days, it may feel manageable. Other days, it may feel overwhelming. Through it all, faith is a steady foundation that allows us to move forward, even if it's one small step at a time. Just as a plant needs time to grow roots before it can blossom, our grief journey requires time and patience. But with God as our foundation, we are never alone. In Isaiah 61 verse 3, God promises to provide a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. This verse doesn't mean our grief will disappear overnight, but it does mean that God is with us, transforming our pain into something meaningful. Faith is our comfort and strength. Loss is one of life's greatest trials, yet faith provides us with comfort, strength, and hope. When we hold on to faith, we're reminded that God walks with us in our pain. He mourns with us, understands our sorrow, and promises a future where grief no longer exists. As you navigate this journey of grief, remember that God is with you. His promises offer hope, His presence provides peace, and His love heals. Like Job, we may not understand why we suffer, but we can trust that God is working in ways beyond our comprehension. And as we lean on faith, we find that we are not defined by our loss, but by God's unending love and promise of restoration.